part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome. This is AJ Black, editor and publisher of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. All right. Over the last week, we've looked at where BC stands. You know, there's been a ton of news in terms of transfers in, a couple out. New coaches. There's a new offensive line coach, and we're still waiting for the official confirmation on the offensive coordinator. And, you know, there's a lot of question marks still remaining about this team. And this episode is specifically catered to look at those questions that still face Boston College. Because as I said, a team that went 3-9 last year, there's going to still be questions. When you look at their SP Plus, and they are projected to finish 13th out of 14 teams next year based off of their projections, you have to have questions. So what are those? We're feeling confident about some things, but what are some of the biggest question marks still facing this team? The first one I want to get into is quarterback Emmett Morehead. Emmett Morehead had a solid start to his season last year after replacing Phil Dracovic. You know, he ended up playing in a total of 10 games, threw for 1,254 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. But to say that his game by game is inconsistent would be an understatement. For, every Duke where he threw for 4 touchdowns and Syracuse where he threw for 2, he had his Notre Dame game where he struggled and the end of the UConn game where he struggled. Now, a lot of that was put on the offensive line. But truth be told, it's going to be a big year for him. He's going to get the full reins of that offense, and this new offensive coordinator is going to have to work with Morehead to see if he can get him into that next category of quarterbacks. Can he progress past young guy who may make mistakes to, certain quarterback that is good and serviceable against good defenses, that can read blitzes, that can make his throws, both long and short, and do all those little things that a good ACC quarterback is going to have to do. I think a lot of folks are hoping, because we saw the progression from Morehead from that 2021 season where he went and threw 6 for 16. Most of that was against Syracuse and was sacked 6 times, to a quarterback that looked like a completely different guy in 2022. A lot of that was on Steve Shimko. And as we said on this podcast, Shimko was most likely going to be the guy calling plays along with Rob Chizzinski this year. So he's going to have a big role in developing Emmett Morehead. But we don't know what Morehead's going to be able to do. And that's a fair question mark and a fair unknown going into 2023. The next big question mark is on our screen right now on YouTube. And it's a big one. That's the man in charge, Jeff Hafley. We are entering year 4 of Jeff Hafley. As we have said on this podcast, optimism was abound in that COVID year in 2020 when the team went 6-5, but were battling teams like Clemson and UNC and beat Pitt. They were feeling good. And then 2021 happens. You lose Phil Dracovic, 6-6, a year that many folks were expecting big things because you were returning so much talent. It was a disappointment. And then last year was a disaster. So this is a big year for Hafley. And I think there's a lot of unanswered questions about where his potential is. You have different folks saying different things about what they think he can do. There's a lot of national guys that think that he'll figure things out. There's a lot of fans that don't. Will he be able to get this team back to where they need to be? It's a year where there's going to be a schedule that is perfectly tailored for Boston College to turn things around. But it seems like every year so far, other than 2020, the last 2 years, have found some sort of catastrophic issue with the roster that caused the team to collapse. It was the quarterback, and then it was the offensive line. Is there something that we're missing? And if that happens again, does Hafley get a fifth year to fix things? I don't think he will. I don't. He's a nice guy, and I think there's a lot of potential there. But if he messes up again and this team is not set to win, this could be the last. I think this would be the last year for Jeff Hafley. So his ability to turn this team around, I said Moorhead was the biggest question, one of the biggest questions. I'm lying, folks. Jeff Hafley is the biggest question, right? He is the captain that's in charge of this ship. And so far, this captain's run into two icebergs. He's got to prevent year 3. He's got to show that just like Moorhead has to progress. Hafley has to learn from his mistakes. He has to learn as a coach how to get his team to that next level. And that's a huge question mark. Can he do that? Or is there something about his coaching style, whether it's the play calling, whether it's the way he's evaluated talent? I'm not sure what that is, but is there a Achilles heel to Hafley that is on both legs and on both shoulders and both elbows that is going to take him down? And that's going to be a big question mark, because we could be sitting here in October going, what the hell happened to this football team? They had an easy schedule. What's going on? There should be enough talent on this roster to not only get bowl eligible, 6-6 would be a disappointment with the way this schedule looks, but to do things that BC has not been able to do to get to that next level. I'm not saying they need to win the ACC. I think that's foolish, but they should be able to possibly win 8 games. I think that's a potential. But again, it all goes back to the head guy in charge. If there's something wrong with this team and I'm not seeing it, and we, watch as the horror unfolds again in the fall, that's going to be the death knell for Jeff Hafley's tenure at Boston College. He'll end up being a defensive coordinator at some Power 5 program again, and we'll be on to coach number 4 since Jeff Jagosinski. But that's kind of where we're going to leave that part. Now, in a moment, I'm going to actually look at some other parts of this team that I have question marks. I have a question about recruiting. I have a question about special teams. I have a question about defense. I've got a lot of questions. So for folks that think that I've been too kind to this team, you're going to want to hear what I have to say about that in just a moment. Now, if you have been listening to our podcast, FanDuel is the new sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network. And with it being the midway point of the NBA season, it's a perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet of up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Now, if you're into college sports and you don't live in Massachusetts, because you can't bet on FanDuel in Mass yet. I think it's March 10th that they're looking at. But if you live out of town, you can bet on the BC game this weekend. It'll be interesting to see what the line is. They're playing in Tallahassee, so I'm guessing the Florida State Seminoles will have a bit of an edge, but check it out. Check out to see what FanDuel has. They put the odds up nice and early, so make sure to check that out. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a bigger chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet of up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. This is Locked On BC. AJ Black. Thank you all who have listened and subscribed to our YouTube channel. If you have not done so already, we are gaining new followers every day, and I want you to be part of this army. I want you to be a member of our subscriber base here at Locked On BC. We are up to almost 750. We want you to be part of it. And if you need more examples of why you should do it, I'm telling you, we have a great comment section, and we have guys like Christian Mahogany out there who just said, I just want you to put the word out there that we're back up. Christian is making sure you guys all know that this season isn't about question marks, that they're going to be winning. And he has been very adamant about that in our comment section. So make sure to check it out. All right. So question marks. These are not me doubting BC. This is not me saying I don't think it's going to happen. I think it's question mark. It's reasonable doubt. It's reasonable to think that these are things that we need to see to believe. And if you're an optimist, if you're someone who thinks these things are going to get better, then you're feeling pretty good. But there's still things that we have to see on the field. And one position I want to see next year that I think is a big question mark, because I think they need to take that next step, are the linebackers. Now, Cam Arnold is now, and I can't believe I'm saying this, on his 4th year with BC. He came in with Jeff Hafley. He is he's going to be a senior linebacker next to Vinny DePalma, who I believe is also coming back, who is, I think, 5 years, possibly 6. He seems like he's been around forever, which is great. You have veteran leadership now back there. Now with Cam, we all know the story of what he came through. He was a safety when they first recruited him. He came in, he converted from safety to linebacker, and he's had to adjust a little bit, which is normal. But he hasn't had I don't think he's had a breakout season yet. Now, last year, in terms of his Pro Football Focus grade, he had a 60.7, which I don't think is awful. His run defense was great. He had a 71.5, 71. He was a tackling at 71.5. His lowest grade was coverage. He struggled in coverage, but like everything else there shows me that he's a guy that, with a little bit of finesse in terms of that short coverage game, will be a good linebacker. I mean, everything he has is in the 70s other than coverage. So he's a guy that I think could potentially make that next step. Vinny DePalma has been consistent, and I thought he had a pretty good season last year. He finished with a 64 grade on Pro Football Focus, 66 in tackling, 67.4 in coverage. I don't want to bash Vinny. Vinny is a guy I know that defense really values. He's not the fastest guy on the field. He's definitely not. But he's a guy that, there were a series of big plays he made during the season in games that they lost, but it was like getting the defense off the field types of plays. And I thought Vinny did a nice job with that. So I think the big question marks are going to be Arnold. Can he take that next step? But more so Bryce Steele. Bryce Steele played a lot of downs last year. Another kid, he was a sophomore that converted from safety to linebacker. And he graded out, he was one of the lower grades on the team. He graded a 46.3, which is not good. Good at pass rush, he had an 86.2, but his grades in run defense and in coverage were really bad. So he's going to be a guy that has to take a next step. Like he can't be a liability in that linebacker room. Like you need him to be able to do that. And this is the year to do it, right? It's his junior year. Can he do that? That's a big question. Again, question mark. You want to see, he's a former 4-star recruit. Excuse me. Will he take that next step? So I think linebackers are a definite question mark heading into next year. All right. Next, going in the defense again, Elijah Jones. This was one of the bigger stories of the season. He graded out as a 65.1 and a 69.7 in pass coverage. But now with Josh DeBerry in the transfer portal, can Elijah Jones be the shutdown corner that they need him to be? He had, against NC State, he had a 73.7 in coverage. He had a 72.1 against UConn, and 82. He was lights out against Clemson. He had an 83 grade against Clemson. He had a sick game. So he has the potential to be that guy. You want to have a guy in your secondary that you can stick out there that can be your, shutdown corner. I thought DeBerry had the potential to do it. I think Elijah Jones honestly has a higher upside right now. He's a good size. He's 6'2". But I want to see more consistency out of him. For every game I said that he had an 82 against Clemson, he also had a tough game against Florida State. He had a tough game against Maine. So there were not, it was trending in the right direction. So hopefully he can put that together. But that's a big question mark, right? You want him to be the leader in that secondary, the big guy that can do a lot of things. And I think he can do it. So we'll have to wait and see. Next, let's look at the kicking. Special teams. Special teams was special last year. I think we all remember our conversations that we had on this podcast about how every game there was an issue with some sort of part of special teams, whether it was Connor Lytton regressing, there were shanked punts by Dennis Longman, there were kick returns that bit them, there were block punts, there was, you name it, they had some issue all over the field with special teams. Question mark for this year, can they clean that up? Can Lytton get back into being that 80% kicker? Can Sam Kandati, the Aussie rules punter, become the every down punter? He looked at times like he was more a situational punter last year, but they're going to need him, to flip the field next year. And can they cut down on the mental mistakes there? Because I think a lot of it was mental mistakes, like, holding on kick returns and mistakes here and there. I think that will be a big question mark for next year. Special teams is something that goes under the radar a lot, but you only talk about special teams when they're A, making huge plays, or B, they're costing you games. BC last year, I think there were other issues that cost them games, but there were times where that special teams did them no favors. So I think it's going to be a big piece for them for 2023 to clean it up. And we've seen them have, I think back to Grant Carlson in 2020 and Connor Lytton in 2021. They've had times where that special team to look good. It's just they need to be more consistent. Like good teams, like look at what Clemson does. BJ Potter was an excellent kicker. They never had to punt. Well, they had to punt because DJ couldn't move the ball, but it was never something that you talked about because they were just consistent. Like they don't make big mistakes, and good teams do that. Pro teams, you look at the Pats, they're always consistent. You got guys like Matthew Slater who never make mistakes or very rarely make mistakes. That BC needs a level of consistency like that too. Now in our final segment, I have one last question mark to ask. And then we're going to wrap things up and just do a little preview of the weekend as there's some big BC events that are not football coming up. We'll get to that in just a moment. This is Locked on BC. I'm your host, AJ Black. Thank you all for listening. And for all of you who have made us your first listen every morning, thank you so much. We are the only Boston College daily podcast out there. And, there is a need for this. Folks want to talk BC sports. It's a quiet group right now, but when there's big events, people want to talk about it, and I want to be there to give you all the analysis and inside information that you want. So one of the big questions I had was about recruiting. This is actually something I'm gonna kind of veer off a little bit here. We talked about defense. I talked about Emmett Moorhead, and the offensive line I could bring up, but we've beaten that to death. I'm not going to bring that up again. Recruiting. I have a question in my mind that I'm wondering where the staff is on this. BC, if you are a follower or a subscriber of Eagle Insider, the Boston College has really put an emphasis on St. Francis Academy since Jeff Hafley has taken over. Azar Abdul-Rahim, the associate head coach and defensive backs coach, has a great relationship with that staff, and they've been very active in terms of offering kids. They've had 5 or 6 kids commit to BC and over the last couple of years, and they always seem to have vans of kids coming up to visit from St. Francis Academy. It's a good school in terms of like football talent. They're one of the top 5 teams in the country, so it's not a bad idea to get in because they've had. Right now they have one of the top quarterbacks in the country who's going to end up at a blue chip that's not going to end up at BC. But I have to wonder, this offseason has brought up a bunch of questions about BC recruiting this school in my mind. In the past couple years, they landed Jude Bowery, who I think will be a starting offensive lineman before the time is, before things are over. They landed CJ Burton, who's in that picture right there. They also have KP Price, and I am blanking. No, I'm blanking on another one. I think they've had 4. Darrell Robinson was the other one. But what happens with all of these guys other than Jude Bowery? They're all out of the program already. BC has had, I think, 3 or 4 decommitments at really bad times from St. Francis Academy. First, you had Brian Sims, who decommitted to go to Cincinnati. Whatever. You had Darrell Robinson, their running back, who I know they were really high on, decommit to go to Charlotte. Like, really? You had Jamal Hood, who I don't know why he didn't end up at the school, but you can take any guess you want. He's not playing anywhere, so I don't know what happened there. You've had CJ Burton, who left the program. So, yes, your recruit, and Burton was your highest rated recruit under Jeff Hafley. But what's the point of recruiting a school if every time you get a kid from that school, it never works out? I mean, BC's shooting, they're below the Mendoza line here in terms of how they're batting against with these recruits from the school. So I wonder if BC would be best off looking someplace else, trying another program, that maybe is a little bit more stable. And I don't know I don't know if there's any sort of like running theme with these kids or what's going on there. I'm not going to guess. I'm just saying there seems to be a pattern here. And you just look at the results of what's happened from the kids that they land or are interested from St. Francis Academy and what happens to them once they either commit to BC or end up on campus. So my biggest question mark is, does BC move on from St. Francis Academy or do they continue recruiting there? It's a treasure trove of talent, but as I said before, what's good is talent if they're not going to ever play on campus. CJ Burton right now is the only one who ever played, and he only was like a spot starter here and there, and he really didn't play much of a role last year, other than the first couple of games. So I think there's a question there for the recruiting moving forward. Now, this weekend is a big weekend for BC sports. BC basketball heads to Tallahassee to play Florida State. Florida State's interesting because they are a team that started off the season miserably. They had one of their stars hurt. He came back, and they've been playing much better lately. And I think they're going to be a challenge for BC, but it should be a good game, and that's on Saturday. In addition, you also have BC baseball. They're opening their season against Pepperdine. Someone asked me if to cover BC baseball for this. I mean, folks, like part of this podcast is I talk about what people are going to listen to, and baseball is great for the very small group that listen to it. But I have heard over and over again, most people don't care. And so unless something really interesting happens, I'm not going to, I'll give you some results, but like, I'm not going to like the games. Many of the games aren't on TV. It's impossible. We'll keep an eye on it though. Women's lacrosse, I believe, has a game this weekend, and hockey is also playing this weekend as well. So we're going to head out, have a great long weekend. I know Monday is a holiday, and we'll be back on Monday. We'll talk about the Tallahassee game against Florida State. We'll talk about, if there's a new offensive coordinator or anything that happens for BC basketball. I'm going to be up in a ski house for the week, but I will be recording. It might sound a little different than right now because I won't have all my A+ equipment, but I think you guys will enjoy it. So make sure to follow me on Twitter at AJBlack_BC and hit that subscribe button on YouTube right now. Just do it. Thank you so much for everyone for listening tonight. We'll be back again soon. We'll see you again.